Remember all the passion and vision you had when you first went into teaching? Feeling like building young minds and creating community through your work would make a lasting impact on this world? Well, those days may feel like they're behind you now because you're exhausted, stressed, and overwhelmed and frustrated, but I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be like this. In fact, the love of teaching never really went away, but it absolutely needs transformation. Welcome to the Take Notes podcast. I'm Jen Rafferty, former music teacher, mom of two, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, and I'm here to light the way for you. In order to create a generational change for our kids, we need to shift the paradigm away from the perpetual stress and overwhelm and into a life of joy and fulfillment. This is Education 2.0, where you become the priority, shift how you live your life, and how you show up both at work and at home. So take a sip of steamy morning coffee and grab your notebook. It's time to take notes. Hello, and welcome to season 2 of Take Notes. I am ecstatic about this season. There have already been so many interviews recorded, ready to go out to you to bring you some of the best information, inspiration, and ways to integrate things into your practice that I'm just blown away by the people who have been on this season, and I cannot wait to share it with you. And I'm especially excited to kick off this season with one of my favorite people, my sister. Thank you, Rachel, for being here.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here.
This is a super special thing for me to be able to present this episode to you and to share her with all of you, because Rachel and I have been working behind the scenes together in pretty much our whole lives.
Yeah.
And it's as we have gotten older, particularly in the last few years of her going into her role and me kind of going into this new empowered educator role in my company, we have been going back and forth over and over. What books are we reading? What new trainings are you getting? How are you looking at this? What are you doing here? Because Rachel is actually the head of learning and development at a company called Veterinary Growth Partners. And as a content creator, she's a consultant and a speaker. She creates and delivers interactive leadership training programs that support veterinary practices in establishing or sustaining highly productive teams. And through conflict management and emotional intelligence training, Rachel works with teams to enhance their culture, boost team morale, and improve overall communication. And her goal is always to create fun and engaging learning programs that make leaders feel less alone, give them the tools to excel in their roles, and create beautiful moments of growth and awareness. So obviously, we have so much to share in what she does with her practices and what she does with the veterinary industry and what I do in education, because essentially we're doing the same thing, just different industries. So Rachel, I'm so glad you're here.
I'm really so excited to be here. This is so fun. And especially adult lives, there's always been this like, how are we going to work together? How is, you're in teaching, I'm in vet med. How are our paths going to sort of cross in this way? And we're finally here. You're right. Like there's this beautiful alignment in where we both are in our careers and what we're doing. It's been really fun to be able to work together in this way. So I'm really stoked. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And so this conversation today, there are so many things we could have spoken about, but I think what is a little bit different and unique about some of your skill set that needs to be given the spotlight a little bit is your experience in conflict management and your emotional intelligence training. Now, we both took similar trainings in emotional intelligence, and you kind of went through it in slightly different venues as well. So you have different things to bring to the table, which I also want to talk about also. So let's start with, why were you interested in emotional intelligence and more specifically conflict management?
Yeah. So my journey in emotional intelligence actually started while I was between jobs. So I was in a job that left me completely drained. It was altogether too much. I found that when I was working in this role, I didn't have a voice. I became very submissive. I didn't advocate for myself. And I really put myself in a tough spot physically, mentally. As you know, in that role is when I was diagnosed with lupus, and I had a lot of shame around it. And unfortunately, all the stress of my job created immense illness inside of me. And it just got to a breaking point, like most of us have, when you're just like, I just can't do this anymore. Like, am I literally going to let this job kill me? And it really took 2 trips to the hospital before I actually was willing to almost admit defeat. And that was really hard for me. And so my emotional intelligence journey started when I left that job and the toxicity that it caused my life. And essentially, I went on this healing journey. And a part of that, I called it my woman of leisure time when I was in between that job and my next job. And I really had to find myself. And one of our good friends and life coach, Tracy Litt, she actually at the time had recommended a Brene Brown book to me. She recommended, oh my gosh, Daring Greatly.
Daring Greatly. Yes. I remember because that was my first introduction to Brene Brown too.
Yes. So it was Daring Greatly. And the only reason I hesitate on the name is because she has so many and I read them all. So it's like, which one was I start? But Daring Greatly was that point. It was my aha moment. It was the click that I really needed to start rethinking who I am. And I happened to then go work for a company that was already doing emotional intelligence training in the industry. And it was just such a beautiful fit of me coming into this new role with this new version of myself that I had to recreate and figure out who I am and how it was that I got to a point where I let my values go and I lost myself. And then coming into a company that so deeply values this work to the point that we're actually teaching this to hundreds and hundreds of people that need this work as well. And so it was just really, it really sort of felt like kismet that I found this company that was equally as invested and just saw the value of this work for our industry as much as I saw it for myself. So that's the origin story.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I refer to the origin story a lot. It's important that we connect with that origin story because it provides an incredible amount of inspiration and grounding of like, oh, right, this is why I've made these decisions. So I want to just go back for a second because you said a couple of things I want to hit on. When you were diagnosed with lupus, when you were in the hospital, those few times, it was scary for everyone around who was close to you. And one of the things you used to describe it just then was you kind of had to admit defeat. And I'm curious, looking back on it, do you still see it that way as defeat?
No. And I'm glad you asked that. So yes, to clarify, in the moment, and I remember crying about this, sobbing about this, that was a moment of awareness for me too, that I realized how deeply I felt about being a quitter and how this job was beating me and how me choosing myself, like literally, that's how I saw it in those moments. That's sort of where I was personally. Like I was somebody, and I still feel like I'm somebody who can do anything. I know that I can. I have a ridiculous amount of confidence in myself and my abilities to get things done and to do it. And it was like, I finally found something that I just had to say, I can't. And, it's one of those things that, yeah, in those moments, I really did truly feel that. It was hard for me to give up because I wanted so badly to really, I guess, myself. I don't think anyone else was sitting on the sidelines being like, you better do this,
I think everyone was telling you to do the opposite.
Yeah. And so it was really an interesting insight into myself because before that moment, I don't know that I ever would have thought of myself as somebody who felt any sort of way about quitting, right? And what the word quitting means. And I found in that moment that I guess I did have some sort of identity crisis around being someone or thinking that doing this thing meant something. And it really just didn't, right? All it meant was that I was putting myself first. And it took me far too long to get to that choice. I let myself and my health get way too far away from me. In hindsight, I should have done it a lot sooner. And yes, I should have listened to all the people in my life who were like, Rachel, just stop. You don't have to do this, right? I just had a lot of pressure on myself and that real strong desire to succeed. But no, after all these years of work, since then it's been about 7 years, the work still happens on a daily basis, but the balance that I put on my life and the boundaries that I've put in my life, winning and having that sort of like imaginary trophy at the end of being able to feel like I did something, yeah, that's gone now. The desire for me is always health and wellness first. as much as sometimes I make bad choices or the wrong choice, I still know deep down that that is my true priority. And so when I'm faced up against something now, that it's like, do I have to admit defeat, so to speak, right? And basically just either choose not to do something, ask for more help, whatever it is, or risk my health? Oh, my health is always coming first. That has been such a complete paradigm shift for me, being that person in bed who was not crying about her health, but crying about not being able to complete this task, which kind of speaks to my massive checklist person.
Right? Yeah.
I had to check the box on this job and be like, no, check, I did it.
I love a good checklist. But I think that switch from this idea, first of all, of what success is, what it means to be successful, and understanding that if you're quitting something because you're choosing yourself, you're actually winning. That's huge, and really the underlying message of Empowered Educator, we go through all the tenets and they kind of break down as to how we get there, but it's always about putting yourself first, because that's how you feel empowered to make choices in your life that align with who you are. And I want to speak to something else that you said before we move on to kind of the nitty gritty in it, is that we do make stupid choices. We do make
every day, all the time,
and the thing is, and this is a big part of it, is that self-forgiveness piece, because you as beautiful Rachel, who is on this new path, wouldn't be here right now if you didn't make those choices in your path.
Yeah. I saw the real depths of the other side of what lupus can do and what that disease can do to your body. And I'm grateful that I didn't have to sit in that for very long. I'm sort of having lupus. I always say lupus is almost like a gift now. I mean, I never would have said that 8 years ago, 9 years ago when I was officially diagnosed, but it is a gift because it is harder for me to ignore all the warning signs now. I know where it will put me if I ignore them. And for me, not that anybody wants to have something like this, but it sort of created this superpower, like I like to see it, where when things are getting too far or I'm ignoring too much and I'm missing the signs, my body is the first thing to be, hey, stop it, slow down, you're doing too much, please be careful. It's unfortunately, it results in discomfort and pain, but it's literally the physical indicator that something is not right. I'm either feeling a feeling I'm not addressing. Usually that's like stress and overwhelm for me, or I'm just actually physically doing too much. And I have this opportunity to recognize those things, those warning signs, and do something about it. And I'm responsible for that. And I can choose to ignore it and face the consequences, or I can cause this moment of pause to reevaluate, think about what's going on. And so for me, these moments of awareness physically come in sort of big gestures. I'm fatigued or my hands hurt or things like that, but everybody gets them in their own way. They're probably more subtle for most people, but it is just this indicator that sometimes we just push these things away, right? Oh, my back hurts today. Oh, I didn't sleep well last night. Oh, I didn't do this. I didn't do that. Something hurts. I don't feel good. I have a headache. All of those things are signs. Those are all signs. Our body is not in this homeostasis kind of place. And these things don't just happen, right? And so, but it's easy for us to be like, oh, my back hurts, but I'm still going to do all the things on my list today because whatever, I'll just take an Advil and pretend it's not happening. But to actually look at all of those things as indicators is game changing, because then you can just be like, okay, no, like I actually think maybe today I need to rest. And what's funny about that is, as somebody who clearly had issues with achievement and what that meant to me, rest was something that is rule number one. If you're having like a flare up of any sort of symptoms, rest. And I actually, after many years of dealing with on and off flares of lupus that come in, days or weeks or months or years sometimes, I actually, not that long ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, literally had to Google what rest meant. What did, quote, they mean by rest? Because I didn't think I was doing it right. Because I'm like, does it just mean I do like less? Like, does it mean I have to be bedbound? Like, what do we really mean when we say it? And what I found is that, yeah, it means like sit your ass down and don't do anything, like for as long as that requires. And I literally traveled to San Diego while I was quote resting. I like went on like a full day hike while I was quote resting, like because I'm like, oh, but it's outside. I'm only walking, and we can justify anything. That's sort of the struggles that I faced, but just tuning in and listening to my body is really the best possible answer for me to stay in touch with who I am now and what I want to be.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up because I remember that. Like, again, I just Googled rest because I don't think I'm doing it right. And, it sounds so silly, but truthfully, we live in a world where rest is not only not valued, we actually consider it lazy. If you're resting, you're lazy because you're not being productive. And truly, to live a lifestyle where you put yourself first, you have to look at rest as something that is nourishing to you, just as the food that you eat and the other things that we consume. Rest has to be a big part of it. And we don't know how to do that because it wasn't modeled for us. And it is not ingrained in this fast-paced society in which we live. So I'm putting it out there to anyone listening, Google rest.
Google rest. Yeah, seriously. Spoiler alert. It's just not doing anything. And by not doing anything, it really means anything. Like that's just it. I kept trying to justify. I'm like, but I can go to the supermarket while I'm resting, right? That's not like an activity, but no, it is an activity. So just for the people who are listening, rest means sit your butt down on the couch, lay in bed, bring everything to you. Don't go walk the dog. Don't go pick up the kids. Don't go to the supermarket. Nothing. Just do nothing as your activity for the day. That is all. Put your feet up, heating blanket, whatever you need, binge something. That's it. And it really is that simple.
It's simple, but it's sometimes not easy because we have to do some sort of mental gymnastics around it a lot of times to make sure that we really understand it. But it takes practice, just like everything else. Now you're great at resting.
Oh, I'm the best. I'm an award-winning rester. I'm very good. I'm willing to coach people if they need support.
If we need resting, coaching, you'll get in touch with Rachel. She will be great. So how does then this tie into emotional intelligence? Because it is all related. And
yeah,
I also love that you said that you were able to find a working environment that aligned with your values. And that's something that is really important. When we're 22, we get out of college, we don't know who we are, let alone our values, right? I mean, we're babies and we get thrown into these jobs and we just do what we're told. And then our whole being is vulnerable and susceptible to being morphed by whatever cultural values are in the spaces that we go to. So for you to be able to say, oh, I really need to be in an environment that supports what I value is huge. So as you're kind of moving along through your life, you want to find these spaces. So in regards to what you want, how does that relate to your emotional intelligence practices and what you do with your work now and how you live and work the same values?
Yeah. So, in that in-between period, like I said, I spent a lot of time figuring out who I am. And a lot of it was reflecting on all the pieces of the puzzle over the time that I was in that job that were a complete misalignment for me. Right. And, I mentioned a couple, it was like, I didn't have a voice. I also felt like I was playing pretend a lot. I kept a lot of distance between me and my coworkers. I didn't laugh a lot at work. There were a lot of missing pieces in that reflection. And ultimately, the biggest piece of that puzzle was that I needed a place that balanced work and life. That truly, a lot of companies say that. Those are really easy words to say, but to live them is another story. And so when I found the company I work for now, Veterinary Growth Partners, that was a big piece of the puzzle, was me interviewing them in the same way they interview me. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. And you're right. When I was a kid, no one talked to me about values. And a lot of them are inherent by how you're raised, but I had never identified them with words. And so it really wasn't until I was so far off the path that I realized this was the deep-seated issue, was that we were just so misaligned on our values. And I needed so desperately to find that place. And so the emotional awareness component of it really came into understanding who I am how am I feeling at any moment? And the values component is a big piece of that self-awareness, right? So with emotional intelligence, you have your 4 big domains, and self-awareness being the foundation, because self-awareness is all about who are you. And so you have your self-confidence, getting feedback from other people and making sure that the gap between who you are and who people think you are is small. But a lot of that really boils down to your values and communicating your values, having that emotional literacy. And the work has to really just start with you. And so I felt like starting the work with me was a great place to begin working at this company. And being on the journey myself has been a really great way to continuously work with our member base, right? So we work with veterinary practices. So we work with veterinarians, we work with technicians, managers, right? Everybody at the practice level. So anyone who's bringing their pets into, who's listening, who bring their pets in, we're working with all the people who work in that practice. And emotional intelligence has been such a critical component to helping our industry because, a lot of people think vet med is puppies and kittens. And to an extent it is, but there's also a lot of trauma. There's a lot of emergencies. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of struggles that we face. It's a very emotional environment. And so I was in the veterinary field since I was in college. This was always my passion and my dream. And so to be able to now support practices in this way where I can help them be better for themselves, be better for each other, and then obviously be better for the clients who are bringing their pets in and the pets themselves. Because an emotionally fit team is what we really need to work through the struggles of the day. And it can be a really tough environment to work in. So we do really, really important work with our teams.
I think, again, why the two of us have been able to work so closely together, because everything that you just described describes being a teacher or a school leader, right? Yes. It is highly emotional. It is sometimes filled with trauma, especially in the last few years, right? Post-COVID, and we're all dealing with our trauma plus the trauma of the kids that are coming in. We don't have training for that. And we come into this thinking it's not puppies and kittens, but it's kids and changing the world. We have this beautiful idea where we're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and we're so inspired and excited, and it just lights the fire in us that this is what we're supposed to do in this world. And this is what really drives me, an empowered educator. There is a huge gap of what we're prepared for and what the skills we actually need to do our job well. And emotional intelligence is one of the biggest bridges between those two spaces and places. And you're so right with this regarding the change. It sounds so cliche, but we say it all the time. The change has to happen with you. You can't just point fingers at everyone and everything else and say, this is what's wrong and this is what's wrong. And if only they would just do this. And if my supervisor would just blah, 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 blah. No. And when we start taking back our power in that way, understand that self-awareness is really the foundation of everything. That's when we can get some traction as to where we can go next.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that the emotional intelligence component was something that is missed in everybody's education, period. The fact that we don't really talk about it, it's not even something that should just be talked about like one time, like, oh, we take an emotional intelligence course in high school. Like, emotions should just become more of a part of our language. And obviously that's a giant culture shift for everything. That would just be a major shift. I know schools are starting to try to do some more of that stuff, but the reality is...
Yeah, I'm going to just pause there for a second. Because yes, we're trying. And yes, there are some places and spaces doing it well. But, I also say this a lot is that emotional intelligence and social emotional learning is what it's called in that education space, isn't throwing up a YouTube video about empathy and checking a box and saying, we did social emotional learning today. That's ridiculous.
Totally. Right. And it's the same in our industry too, right? It's easy to sit with the team and watch a video. We provide videos. We make that. I have trainings on emotional intelligence, but at the end of the day, yes, you're never going to change by watching a video. It takes concerted effort. It takes persistence. It takes a lot of failure, but it really it has to happen at a deep personal level. And I understand that a lot of people have feelings about that. Not everyone wants to change. Not everyone recognizes a change needs to be made. And from somebody who's been actively doing this work for so long, it doesn't just go away. It gets easier in some cases. It changes though, because we change. And so it's going to be a constant journey. I work with a lot of doctors and people who are fast-paced environments, who has the time. When an emergency comes in, how am I going to stop and take 10 deep breaths? We're not wired for this work. And that's why it really takes a lot of commitment to want to make that change and to also at least give it enough of a chance to see that benefit, right? When I started making new changes, it's uncomfortable because, yeah, you want to go dive in. You want to ignore the feelings that are running through your head and just power through because it's always supposedly worked for you in the past. But it takes a lot of effort to get to the point where you can almost subconsciously make that choice. But what we know, because we've seen it work, is when you do make these changes, the way that it impacts your team, the way that it impacts your life, the way that it impacts the choices that you make. But it has to be something that is a journey and not a destination, as they say.
It is a journey. And anyone who I know, who I associate with, who I learn from, and watching you through this whole journey too, it is a journey. This isn't stuff that it's, one day you're just like, I'm emotionally intelligent now.
I wish.
Right? Like, got my certificate, and it's like framed in your office and like, you're good to go. Life happens. Life is lifey all the time. And you never know, what's going to come through, whether it's going to be that emergency or whether my daughter broke her leg this year.
Just one of those.
Pandemic. The variable is you.
Yes.
Life is going to happen. And you're right. We aren't wired for this. Our brains, our bodies are wired for survival. But we don't live in that same world anymore. We live in this world and we don't have to be activated all the time. Because an example that you gave with the doctor with the emergency, and I don't have time to take 10 deep breaths, how are you going to perform if you don't take those 10 deep breaths?
Yes.
And understanding the value in that. And you're right, it is a shift. So, as you work with people who are in these high stress environments, especially, and again, I make these parallels all the time between your population and teachers and school leaders, because it is high stress, it is high stakes, it is high pressure, and no one's going to die on an operating table, but there is a huge responsibility that we take on. What are some concrete things that people can do today?
I would say the first place to start is identifying your values. I really feel like if you're going to start an emotional intelligence journey, I think it's important to know who you are. Like I said, that's a big component of that self-awareness, because that deep commitment, that authenticity, the transparency about who you are will make a lot of things easier, because once you know who you are and what those guiding values are, it's a lot easier to identify people, situations, environments that misalign. And if you're not really aware of what those things are, it's hard to recognize when there's a problem. And so I say it sometimes, when I talk with practices, a lot of times you'll realize that there's a values issue when you are interviewing somebody. And for anyone who's listening, it could be you're talking to someone and you're like, we just don't click, or something's not right. And, sometimes that usually boils down to some sort of values issue. Something is just not aligning, and it can be really subtle. And if you haven't really identified what those are, it can be hard to pinpoint what that misalignment is. And so sometimes then we continue in these situations, in these environments, in these relationships that misalign because we haven't truly identified what is it that feels wrong. I mean, it's something's off and I can't figure it out. I'm still maintaining this relationship, but it doesn't feel good for me anymore. So values is going to be, I think, the best place to start. And then from there, really, to me, at least my journey has been developing an emotional language. That's where I would try to start. It's not easy. It is literally learning a language, because I would say the vast majority of us don't get a lot more than like your top 5, 7 emotions, right? Like happy, sad, mad, angry, scared. We don't have a lot to work with, and there's a lot of nuance. And the better you're able to understand how you feel, the better you're able to do something about it. So for instance, when I was struggling in my last job and I was dealing with a lot of stress and overwhelm, I only realized I was dealing with stress and overwhelm in hindsight. When I was actually doing that job, the physical manifestations of what I was experiencing felt like invigoration and excitement and importance. And I really thought that that was it. So that feeling, like the only way I can truly like, and I'm sure people can identify with this, is the way my insides would feel when somebody would give me another task or knock on my door and surprise me with something. That little twisting of that rag inside me, right? That's like wringing out some water. It almost felt like a tightness in my throat. But I really, in those moments, was so unaware of the reality of my feelings and what the physical manifestation meant in terms of language. I really thought that those were positive feelings. Like I was important, that I was getting stuff done, that I had a job to do, that this was invigorating and exciting for me. And I thought that's what that was, like legitimately. And it wasn't.
I am blown away. I was not expecting you to say that at all. And that hit home for me. I don't think we've ever actually talked about this, Rachel.
Yeah.
So you're all getting this real time. You're so right. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, so there are so many times throughout my career, that idea of importance, being respected, being a valued member of my school district felt one way, but physically actually felt a different way. That is fascinating. And it's so on point. I'm going to sit and think about this one for a little while because it is, I think, something that hits home for a lot of people. I ask Tenet 2 Vision, we go through core values. What are your values? And a lot of times when I ask, how do you want to feel? People say things like important, respected, valued, and they're asking for this external validation from other people. But sometimes that creates this internal physical conflict that you're describing that isn't actually with the thing that you want.
Exactly. Yeah. And I didn't realize it until I was out of it and doing the work, that I was like, I don't think that feeling important, respected, invigorated, excited should feel physically like this. That's where the disconnect happened. So clearly I'm somebody who feels my emotions very physically. I know that not everybody necessarily has as loud. I'm not saying that you don't have it. It just might be more subtle. But like for me,
we don't know to listen.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I've already, and now that's the thing. Like I've been doing it for so long that I'm very tuned in physically. So I can really kind of feel it when it's happening. But everyone can if you just slow down and listen, right? Because I think that the thing about self-awareness is sometimes it's really easy to focus on the low-level feelings, the negative feelings, right? It's really easy to find out when you're stressed, okay? Like something that's like a little intense. On the scale of intensity of feelings, right? Stress is sort of on like the higher end of how we probably want to feel. So sometimes it's when you get all the way up there, that's when you're noticing it. But we can also kind of slow it down. And in the moment, like, so let's say you're doing work that you think does invigorate you, that you're like, oh, I love this work. This is like me at my highest self. Why don't we stop here right now and think about how you're feeling in this moment so you can actually have something to compare it to. So that way, when you are thinking, oh, invigoration, oh, respect, oh, importance, and it doesn't feel like the way you were feeling in that beautiful moment where your body might have been calm and at ease. Maybe there wasn't a physical manifestation at all. And then physical manifestation was that like actual relaxation. Now I can be like, well, maybe this isn't what I thought it was after all. So that's again the challenge, because it's easy, just like anything. You're driving your car, you're not going to go get the oil checked if the light's not on. But had we maybe done that every now and then, just do like a little car inspection here and there, we might notice things are a problem before they become, oh my God, warning light, it's a big problem. So that to me is a good opportunity, thinking about those moments of joy and ease when you're sitting at the beach, when you're reading your favorite book, when you're playing with your kid, when you're playing with your dog, when you're doing anything that brings you all of those good, happy, good stuff. That's a good place to start too, because then it can also be easier for us to channel that back in those moments of those high level, stressful, overwhelm, angry, furious, like whatever those sort of intense emotions are, I can know what a balancing state is. What do I want to get towards? So all of that is emotional literacy. It's not necessarily just the words. It's also the physical literacy, because sometimes we don't have words for how we always feel, but our body is going to tell us.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. I realize now how much we need to dive in, you and me. And like continue, silly me will like go ahead and do emotional intelligence and conflict management in 40 minutes. It's not going to happen. I would love to continue this with you and keep having these conversations throughout season 2, because there is so much here that we get to talk about and really dive into. And we just barely touch the surface.
Where'd the time go?
You know, we get into it. It's a vortex.
It is. It's a vortex. Exactly. It's an energetic vortex.
That's right. And I'm fully here for it. And I have to ask, as I ask everybody at the end of our interviews together, you know, is considering what we've been talking about today and your perspective on how things are in your world of education. You know, what is your dream for the future of education?
I think my dream for the future of education is that we're all given time and space to explore this part of the human experience. I understand that it isn't where it needs to be now, but I think that maybe it's that culture of that go, 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 that never stop, that hustle, that sort of the American way that we need to reevaluate. I mean, that's huge. But again, it boils down to education, because it's about recognizing the importance of pausing, of resting, of thinking about how we feel, about even just taking a beat before you respond to somebody. It's recognizing the small moments. And there's so much distraction everywhere, all the time, that it's easy to pretend like everything's fine and ignore all that stuff. But so I think that the learning component of it needs to be about creating a value around the self and the identifying who we are, what we need, how we feel. It's just going to come out one way or another. And it's just, I think, critical for us to be able to understand ourselves. There's always a strive to understand others. Like that's like also like the human kind of experience, that connection with others. But we really can't do that well without connecting with ourselves. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, more of that. But it gives me hope and again, gets my fire going, because that's the work that I do. That's the work that everybody who is a part of Empowered Educator World is doing. That's all of the people who work with you and your practices. It is about holding up a mirror with love and grace and self-compassion, that
Yes.
we are on this learning journey our whole lives. And once we learn ourselves more, that's how we can really make the biggest impact in this world.
Absolutely.
Rachel, I'm so excited that you were here. This makes me so happy. And I really can't wait to do this again.
This is so fun.
This is the start. So thank you again. And I love you.
Love you. Thanks for having me.
So if you liked today's episode, please leave a 5-star review and a written review. We appreciate that so much. And I cannot wait to share the rest of season 2 with you of Take Notes.
Incredible, right? Together, we can revolutionize the face of education. It's all possible, and it's all here for you right now. Let's keep the conversation going at Empowered Educator Faculty Room on Facebook.